9th of June, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand, the heir to the Austro-Hungarian Empire, is assassinated in the city of Sarajevo. This triggers a complex system of political alliances that plunge continental Europe into war. Britain declares war on Germany due to the German invasion of Belgium. Immediately, the Australian government follows suit, with Prime Minister Joseph Cook stating, "When the Empire is at war, so also is Australia." The first Australian Imperial Force is immediately formed and committed to the fight. October 1914. The Ottoman Empire's diplomatic relationship with both Britain and Russia has deteriorated. German influence, however, has never been stronger. Enver Pasha, the Ottoman Minister of War, allows 2 German battleships to enter Turkish waters from where they attack Russian ports in the Black Sea. In response to the attack, Russia declares war on the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman government has no choice but to reciprocate, joining the Central Powers of Germany and Austria-Hungary. December 1914. Along the Western Front, trench warfare emerges, resulting in a stalemate as both sides dig in. The British government seeks to break the strategic deadlock by opening up a new battlefront. Winston Churchill advocates for an attack against the Ottoman Empire by using the British Royal Navy to force the Turkish Straits. On the 18th of March, 1915, an Allied fleet consisting of 18 battleships fails to gain access to the Turkish Straits. 3 Allied battleships are sunk due to Ottoman minefields and artillery fire. In response, the Allies commence preparations for an amphibious assault at Gallipoli Peninsula. This will subsequently become known as the Gallipoli Campaign. April 1915. The forces of the Australian and New Zealand Army Corps assemble on the Greek island of Lemnos for final amphibious assault training. Under the command of British General Sir Ian Hamilton, the Allied amphibious assault has 2 moving parts. Firstly, the main assault is to be undertaken by the British 29th Division at Cape Helles. Once ashore and reinforced by a French division, British forces are to advance up the peninsula to capture the strategic high ground of Kilidbar Plateau. Simultaneously, under the command of British Lieutenant General William Birdwood, ANZAC forces are to land in the north at the foot of the Sari Bahir Range. Leading the assault, the Australian 3rd Infantry Brigade is to seize and hold ground along the 3rd Ridge from Chunuk Bair to Gaba Tepe. Following behind, the Australian 2nd Infantry Brigade is to advance up the range and secure Hill 971. ANZAC forces are then to advance east to seize the Mal Tepe Ridge, thereby cutting off withdrawing Ottoman forces. From this position, Allied forces will be able to dominate Ottoman fortifications along the Turkish Straits, and Allied warships will have freedom of action. Constantinople, the capital of the Ottoman Empire, will be next. Nearly 60,000 inexperienced Australian soldiers will fight at Gallipoli, mostly raw recruits with no combat experience. Australian forces are up against a veteran, well-trained Ottoman army with combat experience down to the company commander level. The Ottoman Third Corps is regarded as the best in the Ottoman Empire and has spent the last 8 months developing defensive positions on Gallipoli Peninsula. Expecting a landing at Cape Helles, the bulk of the Ottoman 9th Division is deployed in the south. Only 3 Ottoman companies, deployed in isolated platoon posts, defend the 12 kilometres of coastline from ANZAC Cove to Semeli Tepe. And defending ANZAC Cove specifically, just 81 Ottoman riflemen. At 0420, on the 25th of April, 1915, the Australian 3rd Infantry Brigade comes ashore in darkness at ANZAC Cove, landing slightly north of their intended beach, but well within reach of the objective. Contrary to popular belief, ANZAC forces did not land in the wrong location, nor did they face Ottoman machine gun fire. The first Australian troops ashore are suddenly met by scattered Ottoman rifle fire. The Allied machine guns located on the steam pinnaces that towed the rowboats opened fire in return, lighting up the darkness and hitting some of the Ottoman riflemen on the heights above. Australian forces push forwards, climbing up the steep slopes which rise from the beach. The Ottoman platoon, entrenched on Pluggy's Plateau, offers little resistance and hurriedly withdraws inland, pursued by parties of Australians. To the north, Australian forces gain Russell's Top, driving back the Ottoman riflemen opposing them before capturing Baby 700. In the south, Australian forces overrun an Ottoman mountain gun battery located on Lone Pine. Small parties of Australians, ahead of the main body, push forwards towards their objectives on 3rd Ridge. However, rather than pushing on to secure 3rd Ridge, the 3rd Brigade commander, Colonel Ewan Sinclair McLagan, orders his battalions to halt on 2nd Ridge and dig in. McLagan then diverts the second wave of the amphibious assault, the Australian 2nd Infantry Brigade, to the south, fearing a possible counterattack from Gaba Tepe. With this single decision, the landing at ANZAC Cove changes from an offensive operation to a defensive one, and no further attempt is made to secure the original objectives. 8 hours after the first Australian boot touches land, the Ottoman counterattack commences. While the main body of Australian soldiers sit unmolested on 2nd Ridge, the small advance parties on 3rd Ridge are driven back as the leading elements of the Ottoman 27th Infantry Regiment arrive. Under the command of Colonel Mustafa Kemal, the Ottoman 57th Regiment attacks from the north, driving an advance party of Australians back to Baby 700. To the south, an Ottoman battalion of the 27th Regiment attacks the Australians located on Lone Pine. In both areas, heavy fighting occurs over the next few hours until the Anzacs are driven off Baby 700, and the Ottomans recapture most of Lone Pine. In total, 5 Ottoman battalions counterattack against 14 Anzac battalions until nightfall and exhaustion bring fighting to a halt. By the end of the first day, the Anzac beachhead is barely 1 kilometre deep, and 613 Australians have been killed. Birdwood, under pressure from both divisional generals, requests evacuation. However, when the British Navy advises that re-embarkation is impossible, Hamilton instead orders the troops to dig in. And so, as on the Western Front, stalemate and trench warfare emerges. May 1915. The 2nd Australian and the New Zealand Infantry Brigades are shipped south to support the British at Cape Helles to participate in the Second Battle of Krithia. On the 6th of May, an Allied force of 20,000 attempts to capture the Achibaba Heights, with British forces advancing against the village of Krithia. After 2 days of fighting, little ground has been gained, and the British remain well short of the village. On the morning of 8th May, the New Zealanders are committed to the fight, attacking up Fir Tree Spur against heavy rifle fire and machine gun fire. They are soon forced to the ground with heavy losses. At 16:30, the New Zealanders and Australians receive orders to attack an hour later. On the left, the New Zealanders advance into withering fire and only gain another 100 metres. The Australians attack up the long and open Krithia Spur, struggling forwards against increasing rifle and machine gun fire, and with mounting losses, they advance 500 metres before going to ground, having lost 1,000 men killed and wounded. This failed attack brings the Second Battle of Krithia to an end. Allied forces never reach the village of Krithia. The period from May to July is one of defensive operations and tedious trench warfare. This time is spent preparing for a series of major offensives in August. Having failed in the south, Allied forces now seek to capture the high ground of the Sari Bair range from Chunuk Bair to Hill 971, in conjunction with the British 9th Corps landing at Silver Bay. The 1st Australian Division is given the task of creating a diversionary attack, a feint intended to draw the Ottoman reserve force away from the main assault in the north. The Australian objective: capture the Ottoman trenches on 400 Plateau and create a breach in the Ottoman front line along 2nd Ridge. 400 Plateau is the former location of a single Turkish pine tree. This is the Battle of Lone Pine, and it signifies the start of the Allied August offensive. On the 6th of August, 1915, Australian and Ottoman trench lines are separated by only 100 metres. At 17:30, the Allied naval and artillery bombardment ceases, and the Australian 1st Infantry Brigade goes up and over, surging forward from an underground trench dug halfway across no man's land. Australian forces reach the Ottoman trench line only to find it roofed with thick pine logs and with no easy entrance. While some attacking Australians are forced to continue onto the open support trenches behind, others physically lift the logs, allowing small groups to infiltrate the Ottoman trenches below. Darkness, cramped, and full of the sounds of men fighting for their lives, close quarters combat commences. Due to the risk of blue on blue, Australian forces wear white armbands and white squares on the backs of their uniforms as they attack with bayonets and begin to take control of the position. Over the next 3 days, Australian forces repel repeated Ottoman counterattacks in some of the fiercest fighting of the entire Gallipoli campaign. By the end, trench floors are carpeted with the bodies of the dead. The attack inflicts heavy casualties for attacker and defender alike. Australian forces are successful in capturing the first 2 Ottoman trench lines. However, this only results in a bloody stalemate. The feint is a failure. 400 Plateau remains contested, and the Ottoman reserve force fails to be decisively engaged. Instead, Ottoman reserves are redeployed in response to the Allied attack in the north. After 3 days of heavy fighting, the attempt to seize the heights of Sari Bayir fails, except for a slender foothold on Chunuk Bayir. At dawn, on the 10th of August, 1915, Colonel Mustafa Kemal launches a massive Ottoman counterattack, driving the Allies back, resulting in the Ottomans retaining possession of the heights. The Allies' inability to capture Hill 971 and the failure of the British 9th Corps to advance further inland dooms the August offensives. Now, checked in both the north and the south, both sides go on the defensive. November 1915. British Field Marshal Lord Kitchener inspects ANZAC positions at Gallipoli and immediately recommends evacuation. Allied forces, some 36,000 men, establish and maintain an operational pattern aimed at deceiving the Ottomans into thinking that a future winter campaign is likely. Under the cover of darkness, ANZAC and Allied forces are evacuated for the next 5 nights to ships waiting offshore. Remaining ANZAC forces install delayed firing mechanisms on their rifles to convince the Ottomans that the ANZAC front line is still occupied. The evacuation of British and ANZAC forces from Sulva and ANZAC, together with that at Cape Helles a month later, are the most successful operations of the Gallipoli campaign and result in 123,000 men evacuated without a single casualty. ANZAC forces return to Egypt, where they subsequently become part of the Egyptian Expeditionary Force. As a result of the Gallipoli campaign, 9 Victoria Crosses are awarded, and the Gallipoli Battle Honour is awarded to units who participated in the landing and defence of ANZAC Cove, May's Second Battle of Krithia, the August Offensive including Lone Pine and the Battle of the Neck, and the final evacuation. 12 current Army units claiming lineage to those AIF units display a Gallipoli Battle Honour on their colours today. Gallipoli introduced Australia to the realities of modern warfare. An inexperienced and inadequately trained Australian imperial force fought against a skilled and determined Ottoman adversary. During the 8-month campaign, 8,141 Australians died. And while Gallipoli was a military defeat, the campaign established the foundations for the AIF's gradual development into the skilled and experienced military force that it would become later in the war.